and welcome back to episode number 98. We are planning for our 100th episode right after the new year, but we're here at 98. Zach Brewitt is back with us today after his Wi-Fi and technical difficulties last week. Zach, how you doing?
Better now. It's always good to get the Wi-Fi issues out of the way early and not, 5 minutes before we're supposed to join. So feeling good.
Yeah, there you go. Ben, how about you?
Good. Yeah, good. Can't complain. Back at it again.
Back at it again with it. All right, let's jump into this. Boston Red Sox, we're going to continue those conversations. Not a ton has happened since we last talked. We were waiting and hoping for Bregman news. We haven't got really, well, we don't know what he's going to do. But the latest is that Arizona is now in the mix, which really kind of throws a big wrench into all this because then it says, well, if he's available, would they want to keep Marte? Would they want to trade Marte? If he goes to Arizona, does that change the leverage on all this when it comes to the Sox trying to trade for Marte? I'll start with you, Zach. Where are you? What are your overall thoughts right now on the Bregman conversation and the current state of where the Red Sox stand in free agency?
I'll start with the state of the Red Sox, and it's poor again. After all the momentum they built up last offseason, you thought maybe they finally turned a corner. All the talk about Chaim Bloom and John Henry wanting to be, not be a team, I should say, of who's just perpetually rebuilding and all these things. Like last year, they finally made some momentum, and then this year, they're the only team who hasn't made any sort of free agency signing up to this point. Even the Rockies and the Nationals just made a signing. They've backed themselves into a corner with this Bregman thing after all the turmoil that Breslow himself brought upon this team with the Devers situation, lying to Devers last year, basically telling Devers that he'll be third base and Bregman will be second base, only to rip the carpet out from underneath him as soon as Bregman signs here. He's basically made it so he has to sign Bregman, or at the very least replace him with a equal bat and honestly presence inside that locker room. So I don't feel great about it. Now, the only upside to that is what we've come to notice about Breslow is that he doesn't ever really leak anything to the media. Any moves that he makes are pretty much what feel like spontaneous, at least to us on Twitter and those of us who aren't tapped in. So I know we waited till February last year when Bregman finally signed. I don't think it's going to take that long. The optics don't look good. Obviously with Arizona coming back into it now, I think Boston Sports Gordo, I think is his name on Twitter. He's all over Red Sox Twitter. Just before this, I came out, was looking on Twitter, and it looked like he was saying, or he retweeted a member of the Diamondbacks media who said that that's kind of smoke and mirrors now as well. They don't really have as much interest as is being reported. I don't know if that's 100% true or if it's Boris just kind of trying to drum up any sort of interest or whatever. So we'll see what happens there. The team, as it stands right now, is worse off than it was last year. They still need a number 2 starter. They still need a bat or two. The same thing that was happening at the beginning of the offseason, at the end of last season. So they certainly haven't made anything easy on themselves by letting Alonso go to a rival, the Orioles, and now potentially letting Bregman walk. We'll see what happens. There's been a lot of smoke around trades and a lot of people saying that they're acquiring left-handed pitching to potentially move that same left-handed pitching for a legit number 2 or whatever the case. So we'll see what happens. But right now, it's the vibes aren't high, and it's kind of more of the same of what we've seen from John Henry of they don't want to win, they don't care about winning. Obviously, we'll see if that changes. More money in their pocket after selling the Penguins, but I don't love it, but like I said, I feel like there's just always something that's going to come up out of the blue from Breslow. But yeah, not great. You never know.
Yeah, I think one thing you just kind of said there at the end is definitely kind of worth noting. A lot of Breslow's big moves since he's come here have been kind of out of left field. Like we knew that there was crochet interest last year. Like we knew that they needed relievers last year. Like what they were trying to do, it wasn't a big surprise. But like a lot of the moves that he's made haven't really been heavily rumored or reported ahead of time. So that's why I think like when we discussed something like the Marte trade, I do think conversations are overblown in that sense, and it's also makes you kind of just sit back with. I mean, the worry's still there because they haven't done shit on the free agent market. But given the history of Breslow, I'm a little more calmer in the sense of like knowing that something could happen out of left field, and it often has, type of thing. That being said, you kind of hit it on the head. Like they're worse off right now. Ben and I discussed last week, like the pitching staff is better off. If they went in right now, like it's a little bit better off than last year. But the lineup as a whole, I mean, there's no denying you're losing Bregman right now, just minimum from what the last year's lineup was.
Losing Bregman's bat, but also just his presence in the locker room. I mean, you saw what he did to Roman Anthony and Marcelo Meyer and the entire team. Like he's a force in that locker room, even when he's not on the field. So yeah, it's just not a good situation at the moment. But like I said, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Ben, where do you see the likelihood here of Bregman coming back?
It's tough. I mean, it's definitely less than 50%. We had heard all. I don't want to say all off season because it's obviously still ongoing. But once the news that Bregman opted out became public, there were a couple of social media posts and stuff on like Section 10 from them saying that Red Sox fans shouldn't panic about Bregman until it's kind of said that we should panic about Bregman. It seems those guys are pretty plugged in. I know Carabas and Bregman are tight off the field. They're pretty close friends from what it seems. So, obviously he goes on social a few days ago and basically says that, okay, well, now it's time to heighten the panic meter about Alex Bregman, which is obviously not what you want to hear for somebody who's pretty plugged in to the baseball universe. I don't think it's zero. There was the report from Sean McAdam that the Red Sox are not really keen on long-term contracts, specifically for players in their 30s. So I would suspect, Bregman will be 32 in is it March or May? It's early next year, early next baseball season anyway. So if they give him a 3-year deal, you're getting him until he turns, 34 years old. You get him for his age 32, 33, 34 season. So maybe they're willing to go to a 5th year. It kind of feels like they'd be in roughly the same, not necessarily the money, but the contract length for Bregman as to what they offered for Alonso. Like Alonso, there were some, Matt, I don't know if it was truly corroborated. The number that I had seen thrown around on X was 3 years, 85 million guaranteed. And then there was a 4th year, and there was some questions over whether it was an option year or a vesting year. So I kind of feel like they're probably in the same ballpark, right? Like if they're not willing to go 4 years on Alonso, are they willing to go 4 years on Bregman? I don't know, but they've got to be in the same realm. And so you figure, the Mets were kind of sort of linked to him last year. Like maybe they kind of lurk in the shadows, but in terms of his market this year, it feels like the teams that were linked last year that are still linked this year, they're stance on Bregman, their aggressiveness towards Bregman hasn't really changed. At least in a bad sense for the Red Sox, right? Like the Tigers have never been from what I've read, the Tigers have never been an aggressive suitor for Bregman. Like last year, we know they offered him the largest contract in terms of years and money. I think it was a 6-year, $171 million offer was their final offer to him. And the word that keeps being tossed around is that their interest this year is lukewarm, which indicates to me that they've really softened on their desire to bring him in. I mean, you really never know, what he's thinking. He's probably got an offer on the table from the Red Sox that's sitting there. He's probably got something from the Tigers. The Cubs are apparently in the mix, but it just feels like there's not a ton of teams out there looking for Alex Bregman's services. When it got reported, was it yesterday was the mystery team report? I was talking to a good buddy of mine, Justin, about this, and we were trying to go like around baseball. And Matt, I know you and I had talked last night, something similar. And I was like, if you go around the league about teams, it's like, okay, well, if it's a 6-year offer, it's probably a big market team. And so we started there and felt that like, in terms of the big market teams, the only team that really made sense off the bat was the Yankees. And I'm like, okay, like the Yankees don't have an option at third base. And it's like, okay, like, are they willing to go to a 6th year? Then you go around, it's like, okay, like maybe the Cubs went to a 6th year, but like the Dodgers are not going after Bregman. Other teams around the league, it didn't feel like either, whether it was a fit or, a need, it didn't feel like that was really anywhere else in the big market he could go. And then I was like, okay, well, like maybe Seattle, like Polanco is going to Queens with the Mets. Eugenio Suarez is a free agent, although he was pretty abysmal for them after they acquired him at the deadline. So I was like, okay, like maybe it's Seattle. Like Seattle probably doesn't need his bat. So it's maybe they want his defense, and whatever he brings at the plate is just a bonus. Because obviously when you've got guys like J-Rod and Cal Raleigh, and I'm sure there's other guys, in there somewhere that, bring pop to that lineup. They don't really need his power. And then like I thought the Diamondbacks might fit in there, but I had some questions because it's like, well, they have Perdomo. Like Lawler's still young, but he hasn't really figured it out. Matt and I would talk about this yesterday. Like he's sucked at least in the early going, but he's still young. I think he's 23. So it was nice to see that the team lurking is Arizona. Like I can't imagine. I joked with Matt, like, oh yeah, like Yankees 6 years, ha 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 ha. Like I'm just glad it's not them. His market's weird. Obviously we've got an offer out to him, so it feels like, I don't know, 35-40% chance it's here. There just doesn't seem to be any urgency from either side, even though it was reported early in the offseason that there was mutual interest for him to stay. He just wanted a different deal structure. Obviously I'd like to have him back because the other component to this, right, is, well, what's plan B, right? You thought, plan A, maybe Alonso and Bregman, basically now your infield solved because you slot Mayer into second base or whatever. But like what's next, right? Like Okamoto, you have to sign him to a deal. January 4th is the deadline. Murakami's deadline is the 22nd of December, which is coming up. What's that? That's 6 days from now.
Monday or Tuesday. Yeah, that's quick.
So, I feel like we might have some answers pretty quick, right? Because Okamoto's posting deadline is next Monday. And then what's that? A week and a half later, almost 2 weeks later, you have to, Okamoto's posting deadline is over. So, maybe there's answers really quick. It just, I keep going back to this, and I know it might be a little bit dramatic. I don't get the sense that the Red Sox have like a distinct direction that they want to go in. We talked about, how they wanted to wait for like the big three, if you want to call it, Campbell, Meyer, Roman. They wanted all those guys to be there. It's like, okay, we have our young core now. Let's build. It almost kind of feels like they've kind of like kicked the can down the road where it's like, okay, we have our hitting core. Let's develop some of these arms and have a pitching core. And then we can go spend on like a guy or two in the offseason as high priced veteran guys that can slot in and fill the gap that our young offense and pitching core doesn't fill. I don't know if that's the plan. I feel like they don't have a plan. I think that's direct to filling gaps that they have in the roster.
It feels like that. It feels like, they fired all the baseball guys, if you will, and brought in analytics guys and financial analysts. Like Sam Kennedy doesn't know how to build a baseball team the way Dombrowski did or the way Theo did. Same thing with, Chaim Bloom and Tim Breslow. So it feels like everything that they do is, like you said, it's either let's say what we're going to do now, and then we'll pull the rug out from under the fans in 2, 3, 4 years, or we'll just do one thing and then change our mind the next week or two. And they're really like, that's exactly how I'd put it. Is there's no direction. There's or it feels like they're splintered where one side wants them to do one thing, the other side wants the team to do something else, and there's no community within the organization. And it's
like Breslow probably has an idea, right? And I know that there was no bigger like Chaim Bloom hater than me, at least from a fan perspective. And then of course it comes out after that.
Shut your mouth.
We might fight over the number one spot of Chaim Bloom haters, but
negative. Yeah, that's fair, Zach. We can battle for that. We can throw down. But after they let him go, we kind of, I know Matt seemed to be kind of ahead of the curve on this. About, well,
what else is new?
If I heard you open mouse kissed a horse once. That's new. So we had kind of operated under the assumption that, well, it's like, okay, and I know Matt and I went back and forth about this, and it makes total sense now. That, if Chaim Bloom had the ability to spend, then he would have spent money. So there was always this thought process that, well, if he's not spending money, then he's probably being told he either can't or that, they don't want to, somewhere in that realm. And then, of course, all the reports after the firing came out that it was, well, ownership was handcuffing him and telling him he couldn't go over X number of millions of dollars. And it, at least with Chaim Bloom, it was usually under the first threshold of the CBT tax. It's hard to imagine that they're operating under a different philosophy. I do realize they went over the luxury tax, at least the first threshold last year, which kind of felt like an anomaly because recency bias. They hadn't been spending that kind of money. I think they finished, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, they were at what, like $246 some odd million, I think was the final number.
Something like that.
And, they're down in the low 200s now. I think their projected was like 241 if they had brought Bregman back. So it just, I look at it and it's kind of tough to see a desire to want to like spend money and compete, which it's truly unfortunate. Obviously we spent so much last off season, right? Like you trade for Crochet, you extend Crochet, and I sit here and I go, well, thankfully they did, because I can't imagine what they would like, how that negotiation would be going now, because Crochet would be asking for double what we got him for. So, I
mean, one thing about like the whole Bloom when he was here, like the biggest argument I always had was there's no GM in any sport that their owner is going to say, you know what, you can spend whatever you want, and the GM's just going to be like, you know what, no, I'll save your money. Like that was always kind of the argument. And I think people, if he didn't come from Tampa, that notion would have never kind of really been there for him. It would have all been on ownership the way it kind of should have been. But he came from Tampa, and everyone was like, oh, he's just this cheap guy that doesn't know how to spend money. And it's like, no, like if he could have spent 275, 300 million like the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Mets, he would have went out and signed bigger free agents. In terms of like Bregman specifically, there was a report, I think it might have been Tyler Milliken posted like the article and stuff. They were split last offseason of did they want Bregman or did they want to trade for Arenado? And I had reported at that point that they did. They had a deal in place for Arenado with the Cardinals. It just was hinging on, did Bregman come here or not? Ultimately, they went with Bregman because Bregman decided to sign here. But there was already a split last offseason. Now, some people have left Boston. Taboni is down in
Arizona.
No,
DC. Sorry.
Washington. In the Nationals, and he brought some guys with him. So you don't know like exactly who was split and all that in that sense. But if there was already a divide internally, there's probably a similar divide now. You mentioned Murakami's deadline coming up. I do think that Plan B is one of them too, Murakami Okamoto. So at that point, the Sox have to say, well, if Bregman's going to continue to sit on his hands and not make a decision, then do they wait around for him and then miss out on someone like Murakami, who is a third baseman, but all kind of signs point to him that if he signs, he's going to be a first baseman in the majors. But that's either way, they kind of need both spots. So as long as you fill one of them, right, it's a step forward. And then just looking at his kind of market, you mentioned like going around the league and seeing who could be interested. Maybe this is just my gut feeling, but I don't think it's a good market. I really don't. I think the conversation that like they went to Seattle to kind of see if they had interest. This kind of wrinkle of, is there real interest from Arizona or not? I know, Ben, we have a source where it's like the connection's there. So it's understanding that it could be very legit, but it just kind of also smells like Boris trying to drum up a market. Right. He's famous for that. And we can kind of go back and you have to take every report with a grain of salt, no matter what, about the legitimacy, no matter who it's from. And I just sit there and I say, I don't know if Bregman's getting these legit offers that are going to blow out what the Sox are offering. We could sit here and say, oh, he has a 5 or 6 year offer from a team. That 6-year offer could be 6 years, 150, like $25 million a year. Like, you know what I mean? Is that great for him? I mean, it depends how you look at it. Or he could be getting a 4-year, $125 million offer, $130 million offer, something in the lower levels, but in years, but in the 30s of AAV, where like the gap isn't very big. I think you're probably right, Ben. I think their offer is in the 3 to 4 year range. And at that point, Bregman needs to kind of decide what he truly prefers. I do firmly believe that he wants to be back in Boston.
I agree.
But at the same time, if the Sox are offering $385, just hypothetically to go with what they offered Alonso, and Arizona or the Chicago or whoever offering him 5 years, 150, like Alonso signed with Baltimore, you can't blame Bregman for saying, I want to be in Boston, but how can I possibly take 385 over that? And so it's just, I think there's a line in Bregman's head probably that says, if the Sox are within this much, X amount money wise or year wise or a combination of both, that he'll return to Boston, even if it's a lower offer. But the Sox need to definitely get within that range of probably where the hometown discount becomes effective. Because if they don't, then obviously I think he's going to have to take the money. But I do think, and I'll say through all this, I do think that they'll end up offering him some type of 4-year deal. Maybe a vesting fifth or like some type of mutual fifth with it is a buyout or something like that. But if a team's offering 6 and 30 AAV, I think he's gone. if teams are all in the 4-year guaranteed range, I think he returns to Boston. But we obviously will not know that until, I mean, we may never, but until after, he signs right now. So it's all just a guessing game.
Yeah. And this is the part of the offseason that kind of sucks for fans. The baseball season is such a long, drawn out process. And maybe that comes up a year from now when they're talking about new CBA negotiations. Maybe, a way to drum up interest in an offseason is to shorten the free agency window. I know, at least from my perspective, right? Like, let's take the NFL for an example. And I understand it's a different schedule structure, so it's not exactly ideal as an example for baseball, because the baseball season takes up 6.5 months of the year. But obviously, so in football, the first Sunday in February is the Super Bowl, right? Or second Sunday at this point. Free agency doesn't start for another 6 weeks because the league year is like the third Monday of March or whatever, or however it's structured. So you've got free agency then, and then there's the legal tampering window, which is exciting because it's like, okay, well, it's like the new league year is, or maybe it's a Friday, and it's like, well, Wednesday, that teams can at least start announcing at noon that they have, that they have deals in place with free agents, even though they can't legally sign them for another 48 hours.
Yeah, the deals that come together in 2.5 seconds.
Yeah, at midnight and 2 seconds, mystifyingly so, teams all of a sudden have these multi-year massive contracts already lined up. It's like, oh yeah, I just called the agents
with players that they weren't allowed to talk to.
Yeah.
And
so
it's like,
right,
how does that work?
Yeah, and then of course, and then 5 or 6 weeks after that is the draft, and so like their offseason is long, but it's segmented. And I understand that baseball is tricky in that respect because the draft is in the summer. It's because they do it after the college season is over. So I don't know.
Their only option would be to do similar to the Sox, where to football, where free agency doesn't start until a certain point, and you're not allowed to talk to players. Like right. if they weren't allowed, free agency didn't start until. I mean, it's tough because it's also, you got to remember, the NFL offseason is a lot longer in general, right? They finish up in February. They don't start again until like August. Early August.
Well, yeah. Well, they have like the random weeks where it's like rookie mini camp is like 4 days long in June, and then they have OTAs, but like mandatory training camp doesn't start till mid-July, and then
so baseball
2.5 to 3 weeks before the preseason starts.
Yeah, but baseball, like, really, they end in the beginning of November, and they're starting back up at the beginning, like mid-February. So it's definitely a shorter period.
Yeah,
it's a shorter period, and so it's really tough because, like, even if you said, "Oh, free agency doesn't start till December," I don't know, today, 17th, like nothing really. Things would maybe a little bit more congested because, like, no one would have signed yet technically, but like it still would prolong on the into January and February. And you can't, and I know that people have brought up the idea of like having a deadline where you can't sign after. And the answer to that is it doesn't work. One, the players would never allow it because that puts extreme leverage on the teams of saying, well, if you don't sign, you're screwed.
Right.
Like, what do you do? And then the other answer is, okay, if you don't sign, can you just not play? Like, you just out for the season? Like, what do you do at that point? So I don't think you can actually have any type of logical deadline.
No, you can't.
And on top of that,
if free agents don't sign, they work out and hope somebody calls their agent and says,
the problem is in baseball, there's no salary cap. So that salary cap would be in a spending floor would be the most logical path to like congesting free agency into a shorter period of time. If you told the Mets or you told the Yankees or the Sox or the Dodgers, you can only spend $300 million or $275 million, everyone's going to be a lot more aggressive to get the players they want in under their budget, right? So if they can, if it's an open book of, well, we could spend 260 or we could spend 300, there's a lot more leeway in terms of like leverage on the player's end. I mean, on the team's end, to say we're not going to like be aggressive in our budgets and in our offers to players.
Yeah, I mean, just because you brought it up, I don't know if a spending floor works, only because, I mean, you'd have to set the floor at like $60 million, which I mean, I'd have to look at payrolls, but like it would have to be so low, because you can't tell a team like the Marlins, who get no fans, that they have to like, I don't know as if you
it would be low, but even 60 million, like that's still 2 or 3 teams at least. I would have to go look at last year's salaries that sit below that. And you know, I think a salary 4 is probably a good idea. But no, you're right. It can't be like $100 million,
well,
like, or $120 million, and have teams operating at a literal net negative, not Fenway Sports Group's fake.
right.
We're going to operate on a negative rumor report that they threw out there, like an actual negative. Because teams like you said, the A's and the Rays and the Marlins, they bring in such little money in revenue.
Yeah,
that
I mean,
if they spend $200 million,
they'd be going bankrupt. I mean, with that said, only 5 teams last year spent less than $100 million on payroll. The Rays, Pirates, White Sox, A's, and Marlins were the only teams under $100 million.
How many were under 75?
1.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so then
the Marlins were the only team that didn't. So the Marlins spent just under $68 million, and then the A's were the next quote unquote cheapest at $78.3 million.
So okay, so you can set it at 80 or 85.
Yeah.
You can set it at like 85, or no, you could probably even set it at 100. Like, since there was only 5 teams, or set it at 80 or something like that, where it's not a big difference, but it makes it, you know, if the Pirates have to spend money or the Marlins have to spend money, that's a team that will have to be more aggressive in the players that they sign.
Right.
And once you add more teams into the mix, especially if you bumped it to like 100 million, those teams like that's 5 more teams that can create competition. Now, it's not good for even the Red Sox or the Dodgers or the Yankees and all them that spend higher than everybody else. But in terms of what's best for baseball, that's probably the best path. But moving on into, you know, that kind of plan B, if they decide not to go Bregman, you know, and we got this question coming in right here. Like, what are the odds of bringing in a guy like Marte? You know, I don't buy that is a real. I mean, it definitely could happen. I don't buy that it's a terribly likely option for 2 reasons. One, he's 32, and generally, like, the Sox don't want to spend on older guys. It's not like his contract's terrible, but he is 32, and more importantly, the dude's like an issue. Playing time, asking for days off. There's talk that like he went away during the trade deadline, the All-Star break, and was like, I need more days off after the All-Star break, because he wanted to like not come back to the team for another couple days. Like, those little things I don't really want in the locker room, especially with a group of young players. But I also just think the concept, and they were talking about it on Felgen or Maz today, you know, if you miss out on Bregman and your answer is to trade like a Marcelo Mayer for Marte, that's awful.
Yeah.
Like, that's awful. Like, you know, you could, that just says we rather let go of Sorry, my cat decided to scratch right next to my microphone. We decided to not spend money, and instead of spending money, we let go of one of our best young players to not spend money.
More than that, you let go of your best player for endeavors for this guy Bregman, who you also drummed up that fake controversy in the first place, Breslow, and then you traded Devers away, and then you told us fans that Bregman was the better fit, was the better player, we're going to ride with him instead, and now you can't even re-sign him. Like, it would be a complete fumble by Breslow, which I don't put past.
Yeah, well, on top of it, it's just as simple as, like, would you rather Bregman and Mayer or Marte? And the answer is, like, well, obviously Bregman and Mayer. So, like, even if the money is, in theory, like 30% more for Bregman, that's significantly worth Bregman and Mayer versus just Marte. Yeah. Where do you stand on, like, the likelihood of that, or just Marte specifically?
I mean, it's pretty low. I mean, I don't think any scenario is true zero. I mean, I'm sure there's some out there. Nothing comes to mind, but Marte, you mentioned before, there's some off the field stuff that's legitimate and concerning. With that said, he is a dynamic player who isn't exactly expensive. The trade-off being that he's 32, and that the D-backs apparently want a noticeably solid return back for him. I kind of look at it from the perspective of, you brought up like Bregman and Mayer versus Marte. I mean, I think it would have to be like Marte and question mark, because if you get rid of Bregman and Mayer and then Marte's your second baseman, well, what the hell do you do with third? It's like you have to do something at third base. And it's like, okay, well, Christian Campbell's playing left field tonight in the Arizona Fall League, and there's no indication that he has a future at third base. So, like, now you're left with a gaping hole, no answer for. I think, and Zach brought this up early, kind of how the way Breslow likes to operate more, I don't want to say behind the scenes, because he definitely operates very much in the limelight and forward facing. But if you look at what he's done in the past, both in signings and trades, I mean, short of, hey, the Red Sox need an ace and Garrett Crochet is probably available. Like there was never a report that said the Red Sox are engaged in trade talks with Garrett Crochet until they traded for Garrett Crochet. And, we were kind of like, oh, like, sick. Okay, like, they actually fucking did this, where they identified a need, contacted the White Sox, who were never going to pay him, and brought him here. And you made a Chris Sale trade 2.0. But, like, nobody saw the Dustin May trade. Like, that literally came out of absolutely fucking nowhere, which was a useless trade other than like, oh, hey, like, we need arms because everybody on half of my pitching rotation needs Tommy John surgery, and they're coming back in 2026. But like every player that they've been linked to since Breslow's been here, again, other than the, oh, hey, Garrett Crochet is probably available and the Red Sox need an ace. The moves that we've made haven't been really publicly reported on. And, I'm not going to go so far as to say that any time that a player is publicly linked to the Red Sox, I'm automatically going to write them off. But I am going to feel a little bit less confident that that's a realistic move. Because, again, Breslow doesn't like that stuff out in the public as a known thing. Because, I mean, if anybody's in sales, the more people that know about your negotiation tactics, the less leverage you have as a negotiator. So if the entire world knows that you want Ketel Marte, well, now you're losing your leverage because now everybody else is going to start calling. If you can keep it secret, then you're minimizing the number of teams that are going to call Arizona and possibly drive up your price. Not to say that I don't think they have interest in Marte. I think you would be silly to not have interest in him, considering you don't have a second baseman right now, really. I would say maybe like 5%, 10% chance that they pull the trigger on it. It's not Breslow's MO to have information about who he's talking to and what players are involved in a potential future plan being leaked to the press. But like B, I don't think the Red Sox look at it and go, okay, we have to pay maybe not elite premium, but like you have to pay a pretty solid premium to bring him here. because the fact that he's only costing like $16 million a year, $18 million a year. And I just don't think they're going to want to pay the premium and then bring in a 32-year-old who, like, yeah, he's a dynamic player, but like, does he make, as the team is currently constructed, is Ketel Marte the missing piece to a World Series? No. You know, would he be the missing piece to a World Series if they had signed Pete Alonso, or, you know, if Alex Bregman was already in the bag and, you know, maybe you swing and miss, no pun intended, you can't land a guy like a Bo Bichette? Sure. Like if he's just the, you know, the one missing component, you know, I'd say, yeah, like likelihood, go do it, you know, but, you know, I think that there's too many issues where like they still haven't made a move to correct the logjam in the outfield, which I think they kind of have to do, because even though it got reported within the last week, I'll say, I think it was since the last time we recorded, it came out that one of the things that Breslow is saying in trade negotiations is that Duran, Abreu, Rafael, Roman Anthony, like having those collection of guys is not a deterrent. So like they're not going to feel like they have to make a deal, because they're perfectly fine having all four of those guys on the roster opening day next year. But then it's like, okay, well, you have Yoshida who can't do anything but DH, and you're not gonna let $18.5 million rot on your bench. So like you kind of have to make a move there. So I don't think the likelihood is very high. I think there's just too many other things that borderline need to get done that, you know, unless the Diamondbacks get desperate and say, you know, throw us Franklin Arias and you got yourself a deal. Like, I don't think the Red Sox are going to do anything unless it's like a much lower asking price for Marte.
Well, there's talk that they like Tolle and early and Mayer. I'm giving none of those guys up in a deal for a guy like Marte. You know, if I'm giving up those type of assets, would you give up
Tolle for Marte in a 1-for-1 trade? I mean, I'd be really hard pressed to say. I'd be hard pressed to pound sand and hang up the phone.
No. But like, I'm just saying, in a general sense, those type of players, if I'm moving those huge, young, good assets, I want someone younger than 32, 2, someone more of a definitive answer on and off the field than someone like Marte brings. Zach, where do you think, you know, if Bregman doesn't sign, what do you think the pivot from them ends up being?
I think it depends on where. Like if Bregman signs before Bo Bichette, I wonder if they just immediately pivot and go right to him. I know, obviously, you know, there was reports, I think today or yesterday, about him telling teams that he's available, or I guess open is a better way to put it, to play second base. Milliken said that's pretty much not his choice. That's what teams are telling him they're going to put out, where they're going to put him. So I would imagine they would try to pivot to go to Bo Bichette. Outside of that, I do wonder if they do panic and they go to a Ketel Marte. I know we just spent the last 10 minutes going over why we wouldn't, especially, you know, Matt, to your point of like they've carefully crafted and constructed this roster with guys who they like and like to be around and want to be around. And does Ketel Marte ruin that? Is he going to just kind of be like Manny Ramirez in 08 and just completely throw a wrench in everything? And then he's just the antithesis of what you've been building here. So my first thought would be Bo Bichette. I think he's kind of obviously younger. He's been asking for similar, if not less than what Bregman is reported to have, you know, been offered, which I know is right up John Henry's alley, is less money. And then Ben, to your point of they're not talking about, or they haven't really been adamant about moving one of their 4 outfielders, that to me just screams leverage or like negotiation tactic, because you said they have Yoshida on the bench at $18 million. No one wants him. He's not tradable. You can't move that contract, so you're pretty much stuck with him. Chaim Bloom, thank you very much. But also, that to me is like who is on the market. But again, back to Breslow's point of, there's someone out there that we haven't even thought of that Breslow has his eye on, or that the team has his eye on, that they're looking to move a Jarren Duran for, or Willie Abreu for. I think those two are probably the most likely to be traded.
I think a Duran deal. I think the Duran deal is going to end up being for someone we have no idea. Like we had no idea was available. I think they would move it for Reagan's with Kansas City, but it doesn't seem like that's likely given what KC
Reagan's at all. Yeah.
But I think
they also kind of shot that down. Like there was a report that came out a few days ago saying that they'd be willing to still trade for Durant because they already, I forget who they traded for or signed,
but it wasn't.
They signed Lane Thomas and they traded for a guy from Milwaukee. I forget his name. But
they said that they were still willing to make a Durant trade if the Red Sox came down on their asking price, and then it came out that they, in basically like an exploratory sense, I think basically were like, if we're going to trade you Duran, they're basically like, hey, is Ragans off the table? I think it was kind of that conversation, not, oh, well, if you want Duran, you have to include Ragans. I don't think it was that aggressive. It felt like it was like, oh, hey, is he available in a Duran trade? And they were like,
I think the Mets match up really well for Jarren Duran. I put out a mock out there. Now, this was contingent on like other moves to make it really make sense, but if they could get Jonah Tong, who is a guy that debuted last year for the Mets, he was downright filthy in AA and AAA. Not that they need more young arms, but just in terms of value, if they could get the guy like Jonah Tong and another piece or two with him, that's a path I like. But again, I don't think you're
getting Jonah Tong and anything for Jarren Duran. I think it would be the Sox would have to give up something with Jarren Duran to get Jonah Tong.
No.
Jonah Tong you're talking about their top pitching prospect. You're not going to get.
All right, we're talking about a guy that's had a 13 ERA, 13 WAR over the last 2 years, and has 3 years of control left.
I understand that. Jarren Duran is more 2025 than 2024.
Yeah, he is sure. That's a 4.3 F WAR guy. Like that's.
I understand what you're saying, but you're not getting the Mets' best pitching prospect who has an elite ceiling and other things for Jarren Duran.
I'm not talking about like another elite piece or something.
I understand that. You're still like you'd be lucky if it was like you'd be lucky to do a 1-for-1. You're not going to get Jonah Tong plus anything for Jarren Duran.
I mean, we could disagree there, but if they gave up more with Jarren Duran for Jonah Tong, I think that would be a poor deal. Simply in the sense of like. And now it's not the trade deadline, obviously, but like proven good young, and Duran's still pretty young in the general sense. Proven good young talent with 3 years of control does not go cheap at all. And
Jonah Tong has 7 years of control.
Yeah, he's also not shown anything in the majors yet. We just don't know what he's going to be. If he was up here and he pitched the second half of the season and he had a 3.4 ERA, and he was showing already, that's a little bit of a different story. He did come up. He made, I think, 5 starts and he had a 7 ERA. Now, I'm not going to be that person that says oh, that means he's going to suck. No, of course it doesn't. But it's definitely a factor in terms of what his overall value is. In a general sense, in terms of just where is he as a prospect around the MLB? He's a good prospect, but he's not like a top 25 prospect type of guy. He's not I'm not. If I was asking for the Padres to give up LDV, that would be insane, of an ask, or even a top 25 prospect, I think would be a stretch. But if they can go in and get a legitimate higher end prospect that's on the verge of debuting, even if it's a pitcher, I would consider it, because as we talked about, Ben, last week, it's do moves that you think will make your team better and just continue to do that and figure out the big picture later. We were more talking about if they sign Kyle Tucker, oh, he doesn't fit, we already have outfielders. No, just sign the good player and get him on the roster. And if the worst case scenario is now you have to trade Duran and Abreu, that's not the worst thing. That you just get a bunch of assets. So if they go and get like a Jonah Tong for a guy like Duran, in the moment, fans are going to be pissed because you're trading away a good player for an unproven asset, and they're like, that's not going to help you win right now. But like, if trading for someone like Tong allows them to then turn and trade Dobbins or Bayo or multiple of these guys for a different elite asset, then it all kind of balances out.
Yeah, for what it's worth, Jonah Tong was the 33rd ranked prospect at the end of 2025.
Where? On
Fangraphs.
Fangraphs, okay. I know I mean, they don't update it tremendously, but on the MLB pipeline, he's much lower.
Yeah, he's not in their top 100. I don't think they've updated it in a while, and I don't have
Baseball Americas.
I don't pay for. Oh, sorry, I got a Jeff Passan update, but it's the Nationals are hiring a new GM. I don't pay for Baseball America, so I don't have like their details as far as where he is on their list. But yeah, so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I want to transition. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, as far as like the Red Sox plan, and I think this is kind of where this is kind of where the confusion comes from for me regarding the Red Sox plan, is that they haven't made a major move on the big league roster. They've made, obviously, they traded Luis Perales for, is it Jake Bennett? Is that the guy they traded for? They made some other moves like that, but there's still so many moves to be made. That's kind of where I'm kind of getting like lost in the weeds as to what is the direction of the team. Matt, I know you posed the question. I'll just answer the question. Like, what is their plan B? To me, it kind of feels like they like the core. I think that they're probably going to be willing to give second base opportunities to Christian Campbell and Marcelo Mayer. Again, like, this is all predicated on the idea that they don't go out and they sign Bo Bichette, who I think would be really good here, would be a great second baseman. I think, monster seats would need to go up in price because I think he would just absolutely rake at Fenway. And he's still young, and he's the guy that fits the mold of a quote unquote long-term contract the Red Sox would be willing to make. He doesn't turn 20. He's still only 27. He's 28, like early-ish next year, February, March, somewhere in that range. But I think
you can give a 6-year deal to him and not think about it.
Correct.
It's not like he's 31, 32.
Yeah, you could probably even maybe they're willing to go a little bit, even more than that. Because, given the fact that, he's got lower body issues, he probably isn't going to age well from that perspective. But, I think plan B feels like some combination of Bo Bichette at second and then one of the Japanese kids at the corner infield. I think at the end of the day, would I be really surprised if the Red Sox two bats were Bregman and Bichette or Bregman and Okamoto? That wouldn't really surprise me at all. But yeah, I feel like plan B is they're just going to wait out Bregman. And, if the market comes down a little bit on Bichette, then, it feels to me like it's those two guys.
Yeah. I think plan, they have a plan of like, if Bregman doesn't work, they're going to go hard after one of these two Japanese guys.
I hope so. The problem is one of their posting windows ends in 5 days.
Yeah. So, Bichette is a guy, and I spoke about this, and I'll be quick on this. He fits perfectly in every sense of the matter. Like, he's still younger. The dude can just mash the ball. Like, he batted .311 last year. He could hit 30 plus home runs. He fits perfectly with what they're trying to do. The question just is like, if they sign Bichette, they're more than likely not signing Bregman, because that means Mayer's going to third. And if you happen to sign Bolt, then I don't know what you do with Mayer. Personally, I think Mayer could go over to first, but do you want to go use a guy like him?
You think everybody can play first base?
Most players can play first base with practice. Most infielders can play first base with practice.
Might as well just put, let's just put Yoshida over there. Fuck it.
Real
quick. On
you have to be above 5'10".
That's fair. So here's the reason why I would favor Akamoto over Murakami. So real quick, so I found this on a baseball Reddit forum. It says it's a month ago, but so these are their NPB, which is the Nippon Professional Baseball. That's the Japanese league that they played in. Percentiles for each player. I'm not going to go through each one of them, but this is where I will go with this. So Akamoto finished with at least being in the 64th percentile or higher in every category, which is like basically like advanced hitting stats and a few advanced defensive metrics. You're talking about like OPS plus, BABIP, K percentage, walk rate, swinging strike percentage, blah, blah, blah. He was 64% or higher. And that 64% was his swinging strike percentage, was the lowest. The only one that wasn't 64% or higher was his stolen base number, and he was in the 27th percentile for steals, but that's not to be surprising. He's a first baseman. They don't steal bases. On the contrary, if you compare the same exact things to Murakami has a percentile ranking below 10% in the following categories: K rate, contact percentage of pitches in the zone, swinging strike percentage, defensive value, and range. He was in the 9th percentile in range as a first baseman compared to the 82nd.
Did he play first or third?
What?
Did he play first or third, Murakami?
So I think it was both, but I want to say I think he spent. I forget which one he spent more time at, but
I think he was primarily a third baseman.
That's what I remember.
But MLB projects him as a first for that reason.
Correct, but
no, I'm also in the Okamoto train.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not against
the first guy
Murakami.
They would pivot to, in my opinion, if they don't get Bichette or Bregman.
Yeah, I'm not like fully against Murakami. The talk of his numbers versus the fastball, like 93 and above, are not correct from what I've read. They're not what people have like tried to push out that they are.
No, and on that, I did hear something the other day that if you look at the numbers that they put out for Murakami, those specific numbers were higher than Shohei Ohtani's when he came out of Japan and came.
Yeah, so there you go. But all right, let's transition. We'll do about 15-20 minutes of Patriots football to finish up here. They lost to the Buffalo Bills this weekend. They went out 21-0. At that point, I was not confident to the point where I should have been, and I guess that, well, I can't even say the way I should have been. The way that the average fan being up 21-0 would be, I was not as confident, and for good reason. They came out in the second half, and I put up the keys to win the game, and it was contain Josh Allen. Did it great in the first half, didn't do in the second half. Mistake-free football. Did it in the first half, didn't do it in the second half. Like, they did the complete opposite in the second half, and they blew a 21-point lead, 21-0 lead to be specific, and they looked like complete dog shit there. Zach, where's your confidence level right now, given what you saw against Buffalo for them to go to Baltimore this week? And Baltimore's been struggling a little bit. Lamar hasn't been typical Lamar, but where's your confidence level heading into week 16 here?
I mean, I'm still confident. I think most of my confidence is coming from the fact that Baltimore just isn't having a good season this year. Their defense is terrible. They've kind of picked it up over the past couple of weeks. Obviously, Lamar, as you just said, isn't the same. But after watching Josh Allen just torch us with his legs, obviously I don't have great confidence that we will be able to contain, I should say, Lamar this year or this week. So that's one thing I want to look at. Obviously, we're going to be without Milton Williams again, and it sounds like without Robert Spillane for at least this week. He's someone that he's led the team in tackles for the entire year, and when he was off the field, it was very obvious. It looked like there were guys where he would have usually been just wide open. And as you said, it was the complete tale of two halves. As dominant and as lights out as they were in the first half, they were completely a no-show, really, on both sides of the football. And honestly, all three phases, if you want to go on the kickoffs as well, they were letting up they were starting at the 50-yard line, if not in their own territory, on just about every drive. I think they had 5 straight touchdown drives, and that was a big part of it.
Yep.
Drake May didn't look great on the fourth quarter. I don't remember what his stats were, but they weren't great. And it kind of goes back.
It was 5 for 12 in the second half.
So yeah, there you go. Kind of got bailed out by a broken play that Travion Henderson, broke. The second one that put him up 28-24, I believe was the score after he scored.
Yeah.
But regardless, it kind of goes back to what I had said a couple weeks ago, where this team, for whatever reason, lacks the ability to put teams away. They let Tampa back in the game. They let Atlanta back in the game when they were up 2 scores in the second half. And they did again, obviously, against Buffalo. Now, Buffalo, of course, is far and away the best team out of all those teams I just mentioned. But I mean, it's one thing to give up 21-point leads. It's another thing to do it in the way that they did it, and just all of the momentum that they had going into the half was just immediately relinquished. I mean, how many times was a tight end or a receiver going to go just run 15 yards up and just sit down and be wide open? There were times it felt like every 3rd and 7, every 2nd and 10, Josh would just drop back there and throw it over the middle, and it was someone wide open. And it was bad. I think Zach Kerr is kind of showing that he's becoming a bit predictable in his play calling. I know obviously we're down a few players. And Josh McDaniels' play calling is also, going back to even the Brady days, has been predictable as well.
He was just way too conservative in the second half.
100%. Which I think
it was frustrating. You're up 21-0. I get it to the point, but you were scoring at will on this team, and then you almost just changed your path. And it's you don't necessarily need to be balls to the wall. You could maybe rein it back a tiny bit, but play your game still. And that's what frustrated me in the second half, of where it felt like they were playing not to lose. And when you play not to lose in the NFL, you have to be really good to do that. The Patriots, Belichick always had the narrative don't beat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the same of not playing to win, or playing not to lose. They made the mistakes. Obviously, they weren't consistent enough. They had too many bad penalties. Some of them were questionable. The Marcus Jones one was questionable. They had a PI on Carlton Davis that was pretty questionable as well. And so, you could argue Buffalo got a little bit of help on that end too, but they just don't look. They did not look comfortable. It kind of the entire second half. Allen kind of came out and was able to do whatever he wanted. They continue to lack pass rush. That is, in my opinion, far and away their number one need this offseason. You need to get someone that you can rely on, snap in and snap out, to create pressure on on quarterbacks. I think the secondary as a whole isn't terrible, and the linebackers as a whole isn't terrible. So if you can add guys that can get off the edge and create havoc, that will go a long way into stopping some of these top guys. But Ben, where are you? Where are you? I know we went back and forth. You were more confident about going to Baltimore than playing the Buffalo Bills. Are you still confident that they will go into Baltimore and take a victory there?
I mean, I would say so. Going into prior to the Bills game, I kind of felt, and I'm not Bills game in a vacuum, but going into last weekend's games, I would say, my confidence level. I mean, I did hate on me if you want. I did think the Bills were going to win that game. I felt that the odds favored that the Bills were not going to have another, clunker of a performance against us. And that, in a close competitive game, I thought they would come out on top. I didn't think it would be as high scoring as it was. But, my confidence level, I'd probably say was like, maybe 45-55, going into the Bills game. I was more like 75-25 going in, regarding the Ravens game, just because of how inconsistent they've been. They've looked mediocre against other mediocre teams. Not that the Patriots haven't either. I know that, we didn't exactly blow doors on the Bengals defense, and they have like the worst defense in the NFL. I would say, maybe there's a couple of notches on the confidence down. Just, I understand, the Bengals are reeling, but if you go into Cincinnati and you hold, with the defense the Ravens have, and they just lost their leading tackler to a torn ACL. So there's that to factor into, this particular weekend's matchup. But I mean, if you go into Cincinnati and you hold the Bengals offense to 0 points, I think that there is something to be said about that. And I understand that, Burrow is probably not 100%. But, and I understand that the offense didn't, there was a pick six in there, right? So the offense only scored 17 points against a bad defense. It's a road game. It's, the Ravens are more or less fighting for their lives, right? Because I don't think they can be eliminated this weekend, but if they lose and the Steelers win, I don't know who the Steelers play off the top of my head. Matt, I think I wrote you a book the other day looking ahead to this weekend's games. But I know that I don't believe the Ravens can be eliminated, but if they lose and the Steelers win, like they're all but done, right? They're 2 games back with 2 games to go. So the Ravens are going to be desperate because they basically are in win. They're in win out mode. Like they have to be, right? Like if they want, the only way that they're getting into the playoffs is if they win the division. They can't get in as a wild card. They already have too many losses. And I don't think they have a tiebreaker against anybody ahead of them. So anyway, I do feel, somewhat confident. The opening line, I think, was Baltimore -1.5. It's not Baltimore -3. I do like the Patriots in this game. The Patriots, numbers don't lie. The Patriots are better on the road. They have not lost a road game all year. And all 3 of their losses are at home. Granted, you have the Bills, the Raiders was a bad loss, and I forget what the other one was, but all 3 of their losses, was it Miami, maybe? I don't know. No, because they're on the road and they beat them already. But anyway, that's right, Pittsburgh. So
I was like, how many times do we have to say it for him to hit or Pitt?
I'm just zoned out. I didn't even hear you. I am pretty confident going into the game. Zach already mentioned it, but it doesn't look good for Spillane this week. Milton Williams and Will Campbell both have 1 week remaining on their injured reserve before we get them back. I still feel confident. I didn't feel like, I know the Bills pass rush is not what it used to be, but it's not bad. Like they have good players on that defensive line. I understand Ed Oliver didn't play, but dare I say that Vidarian Lowe has at least looked decent in the 2 games he's had to play with Will Campbell not here.
He's doing his job as a backup.
Right, exactly. He's treading water and he's not leaking. So,
He was last year.
I know, right? Like, I don't know.
So bad.
Who's the offensive line coach? Because he clearly deserves a massive pay raise considering.
Doug Marrone.
Who?
I don't know who it was last year.
Doug Marrone. Last year was Scott Peters.
Oh, yeah. Peters. I think this is proof that Peters should probably never coach an offensive line for the rest of his life. But anyway. I'm feeling pretty confident. Like I said, the Patriots are good on the road. I know that there's no Spillane, but the Ravens don't have, I'm not even going to try to say his name. He has a torn ACL. He's done for the year, and he's their leading tackler. So, the Ravens have that weakness, and their offense has just been so inconsistent. Matt, you brought up needs. If there's one thing I wish this Patriots team could somehow manifest out of the ethos is a linebacker who could cover. Because they don't, that's a massive hole in this defense. I know Spillane is more of a run specialist, but he kind of also was a spy from time to time. Like he clogs the middle in multiple ways. So, That's kind of a big loss if he can't come back again. I suspect it'll be a competitive game again. Like Baltimore has to win out if they want any shot at the playoffs. So, I still like the Patriots in this game, in a close game. I'm not fully convinced that they would cover necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily say that they don't, but I think they win a good, close, competitive game. And then, you're feeling good because hopefully you're back fully healthy for week 17. As long as the Patriots win 2 of their next 3 games, then the Patriots are your AFC East champions for the first time since 2019.
Yeah, they're still in a good spot. Like that was the thing heading into Buffalo game where it was like, it would have been really nice facing Buffalo to clinch the division against the team that has held that for the last 5 years. But at the same time, like it wasn't the end of the world if you lost. So going into this week, I think in prior weeks I've kind of said I think they're going to have a hard time against a team like Baltimore, and I still do. So this is one of the very, very few scenarios in which Ben is more optimistic than I am about a Boston team. I think that. Yeah, I mean, you're probably in like the 55 to 58 percentile chance of winning type of thing if you had to like give it a rough number.
This weekend?
Yeah.
I'm probably in like the 60
percent.
Okay, yeah. So I'm like really right around like the 50-50 mark where like I have no idea. I think it could go absolutely either way. If this was at home, and it's tough because like they've been better on the road, so it's tough to kind of say, oh well, they're on the road, so it's harder. But like a place like Baltimore, that's not an easy place to play either.
No.
So the question is, what team's going to show up? They went 10, 11 weeks where like every week they showed up pretty well, and they came out against Buffalo and played really well to start, and then they just completely shit the bed. So.
Yeah,
even if they lose this week, I am still confident that they're not losing to the damn Jets. I mean, not like absolutely not. And Miami is now playing Quinn Ewers, who, we don't even know what to expect there. But Miami's out of it, and I don't see them losing to Miami. So even if they lose this week, like you're still pretty confident that they'll go and finish 13-4.
Yeah,
but like,
and they would, and looking at the schedule, you think in all likelihood, because I think I'd have to look at. I think they can afford to lose this game, but they have to win the 2 divisional games, even if Buffalo lose, because you figure Buffalo will win this week against the Browns, but they have the Eagles at home next week, which won't be easy. Like if they lose that game, I still don't think the Patriots would clinch because there's a weird divisional tiebreaker involved. I think the Patriots lose the tiebreaker if they have the same record overall and division with Buffalo. I think they have to either have the better divisional record than Buffalo or an outright better record. So it gets a little complicated. But yeah, like if they lose this game, it's like, okay, well, you more or less have to win your next 2, which to your point, you shouldn't lose to the Jets on the road and you shouldn't lose to Miami at home when neither team is playing for anything and their teams are just downright terrible.
I think in a bigger note, to kind of wrap this all into a bow, is like we went into the Buffalo game saying this is like as much as a statement game as they could have. But the Buffalo win early in the season was a surprise. It was a statement win, but it was a surprise. The Bucs game, like that was a good win. If you could come home and sweep Buffalo on the season and take the division, like that would have been a big statement. On the other hand, though, like I saw people saying, "Oh, like this proves the Patriots are frauds," and it's like they lost by 4. Like they didn't get their ass kicked; they lost by 4. They
was always a 50-50 game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, honesty, and if some of those like if some of those like 50-50 Like, you could throw a penalty here, you could not. If any of those had not gone against the Patriots, I don't know
if that Marcus Jones
I don't
call,
know if they lose, right? Like, they probably should have called defensive pass interference on the end of the first half pick with Mac Hollins. Like, Marcus Jones picked off the pass, although there was a ticky-tack defensive pass interference penalty called against him. Like, if you really slow it down, you can see that he does beat the ball. He does get to the receiver before the ball does. So they're like, there's clearly contact. But like, it wasn't blatantly defensive pass interference. And not to mention, Marcus Jones did intercept it. Like, I don't know how you.
Yeah, it was absolutely an interception.
And
then it was also the Carlton Davis one where Coleman, it goes off. First of all, Coleman still could have caught it, went off his arms. Second of all, it didn't impede him at all.
Didn't impede him, but it was the same exact call that wasn't called against at the end of the Bengals game. Back-to-back calls.
It was a call that on the last play of the game where Diggs. First of all, I don't know what happened on that play because Henry and Diggs ended up in the exact same spot and like twirled around. But Diggs tried to break back out, and I posted that about it. If they didn't hold him, he probably ends up 2 or 3 steps ahead of where he was, and then May could have thrown the ball before he came lined up with Bosa. And it's
but they don't
try not to be like too nitpick, but he more than likely completes that pass if he doesn't get held because Diggs would have been much more open.
Yeah, I leave that week feeling a lot better. Like, I feel worse about the game because we lost the way we did. If we lost 35-31, but it was a shootout and we're going back and forth all game, not just second half. I'm still feeling pretty good about it. But I just looked up the Ravens, go back to the Ravens schedule. Obviously we are 6-0 on the road. They are 3-5 at home. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they haven't played tremendously well in general, but like I said, this is a statement, like in the sense of they did lose to Buffalo. Not that Baltimore's been high and mighty this year, but if you could go to Baltimore and beat Lamar Jackson and stuff like that, that puts yourself back into the category, I think, of like where teams will start to take you more seriously. And then you can go and you're still like in the running for the 1 seed, even though it's rather unlikely. And you put yourself in a situation where like the AFC East is borderline wrapped up at that point.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and like to that, like, I guess my final thought on the Patriots being taken seriously, like, I understand that was an A+ first half and a D- second half. I'll give them a passing grade just because of the Henderson touchdown, and you still had a shot to win it late, you just didn't execute. But even still, I mean, you put 31 points up on the Bills, and you showed that you deserve to be on the same field as, I mean, I think you could make the argument that given the status of the AFC, like the Bills, Patriots, and Broncos, I think are clearly the 3 best teams in the conference. I know that, the Texans have an insane defense, so like anything can happen, but like, I don't really trust anybody else to be a legitimate threat in the AFC. And it's like, you've proven that you belong on the field with the Bills because you beat them on the road and you were within 1 score and had the ball with less than 2 minutes left on it with an opportunity to win the game. Like, you proved you belong on the field with them. You went to Tampa, beat Tampa in their place. I get that, they were down a couple of guys, but like, I think at this point, the Patriots have proven more so that they do deserve the admiration of a top team in this league. And, I think, going into
a big part of it's just fans want to.
It definitely solidifies that.
Yeah, and media just wants to kind of make noise and stuff like that. But
for sure.
Okay. Any final thoughts here, Zach, Ben, before we call it a day?
Pats win 27-23.
Oh, reverse of last week. Was that? Oh, no, that was me that said 27-23.
I said 27-24.
Okay. I mean, I'm not giving my prediction. I'm not ready yet.
I'll go 31-27. No, 31-24.
Pats.
Okay.
Pats win. Yeah, I think that the Ravens defense is bad enough to give up 30.
All right. That's good. I mean, I hope that you're correct. I'm oddly the downer on the situation, so it's definitely something new for me. But okay, all right, we'll be back next week. We'll probably be recording either the 22nd or the 23rd before Christmas. We'll be off the week after that, and we'll be returning in early January for our 100th episode. We're trying to line some things up to have some fun for that episode, but. Until next week, as always, go Patriots. Hopefully they beat Baltimore and Alex Bregman signing.
Yeah, John Henry, you just made an $800 million profit. Fucking go use it.
Is this going to be?
Yeah, we didn't even get into that. You bought the Penguins for $900 million 4 years ago, and you just sold it for $1.7 billion. Like that is $800 million back into the FSG pocket of just pure profit.
Spend it.
Never mind the fact that like you're getting 1.7 billion after dishing out that money. So
Watch 2.0. Hopefully it doesn't last as long as last year.
Yeah. Just sign Alex Bregman. Goodbye.
Goodbye.